Hi friends, it's Kayla Moran and welcome back to the Let's Get Candid podcast. Happy Thursday, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time or day you're listening. I'm so excited to be back with you guys. My voice is a little raspy. I sound very exhausted, I'm sure, and that's because I am officially done with my 3L fall. I have one semester left, 5 months left, and I will be a law school graduate. I will have my Juris Doctorate. And today was my last day of finals, and it was a 24-hour take home, and I'm running on very little sleep. Thankfully, I got a nap in. I am exhausted after that exam. I got some sleep last night, but just a crazy morning with my electronic blue book exam software giving out on me twice, having to restore it, making sure that the right submission got sent to my professor or will get sent to my professor by the records office at my school. Checking in with my favorite librarian and one of the women who work in the clinic and saying like happy holidays and like checking in with them before I fly home tomorrow. So as you guys are listening to this, I will be on a flight to Miami for a month. I'm going home. It's winter break and I cannot wait to be home. I have some really exciting stuff in the works, like I've said before, and I'm just really excited to be home and see my friends and my family and get to take a few weeks off from school because next semester is gonna go by really, really fast. We start late in January already, and we're just gonna hit the ground running. A month and a half spring break, another month and a half graduation, which is the most anticlimactic graduation ever because my parents will be going back home without me. I'll be staying here in Knoxville and studying for the bar up here, even though I'm taking the Florida bar, just so I don't get distracted. And then I'll be permanently moving back to Miami in July, taking the Florida bar exam, and then that's it. We're done. So it's just really, really wild that, today I'm exhausted and just really happy and proud of myself because I've come such a long way in the last 2-3 years, and just looking back at today was my college graduation 3 years ago, and this day 2 years ago I was finishing my 1L fall, and it was one of the hardest semesters and a few months of my life, and I just really didn't know who I was or what was going to happen next, or if I deserved to be in law school and if I even wanted to be there, and that was the path that was meant for me. But here we are 2 years later, and what a wild ride it's been. So yeah, I don't really have a suck and sweet of the week for you guys this week. I just really wanted to say that, and I'm just really excited for what's to come. And 2022 is looking up. It's looking really bright. I cannot wait to see what's next. That's my intro. And I have a really exciting episode for you guys today. Gabby Valdez is a dating coach, and when I discovered her on Instagram, I think through someone else's podcast, I was absolutely obsessed. She shares so much good information about dating and trauma and in relationships and childhood, and there's just so much good info. So I highly recommend you give her a follow and definitely listen to this whole episode and stay tuned because there will definitely be a part 2 in the future. And there's just so much good stuff in here, and I don't want to spoil it too much. So I'm just gonna shut up and let you hear everything that we talk about. This conversation was like therapy for me. I learned so much. I got so much out of it, and I really hope you guys get something out of it as well, because there's some really, really good stuff in here. So without further ado, meet Gabby. Hi, Gabby. How are you?
Good. Thanks for having me, Kayla. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm so excited to chat with you. So you are a dating coach and a behavioral analyst. So what does that mean, and how did you get into that?
So actually, I was a behavioral therapist and studying to be a behavioral analyst turned dating coach.
Gotcha.
So I do have that background. I do have that clinical training. However, I pivoted more towards using that wealth of knowledge specifically to relationships and dating. And then I also have a background in communications because communication is so important in terms of relationships. So the question was like, how did I get into this?
Yeah.
Or like, what are those things?
What are they and how did you get into that? And I'm glad you said the thing about communication. We'll get to that in a second. But yeah, how did you kind of know this is something you wanted to do?
So the unpolished story is really, I did not wake up one day or like graduate from college being like, oh, I'm going to be like a dating coach or really focus on relationships. I think it was a passion and a like side project for years before even deciding to do it. I tried a lot of different things. And I also kind of grew up hearing like, oh, you can't commit to anything. And so like what I realized that was actually a positive thing. I realized I have like so many experiences. So like I've been a teacher, I've been a behavioral therapist, I've worked with like nonprofits and startups doing like communication. So in that process, in that journey, I realized what I really do love doing is working one-on-one with people, and because that allows for us to really go deep. And then I had like a light bulb moment where I was like, oh, I really like life coaching. And then it took me 3 years to finally jump on that. I think a lot of it was like, oh, I can't do that. Who do I think I am? And then after like 3 years of being like, you know what, I'm scared to this, I'm going to try it. I did it, love the program that I went through. It was really transformational, learned a lot about like negative self-talk and mindset and beliefs and patterns. And then did that for a couple years. And then personally, I have gone through long-term relationships where even if I was dating a different person, I was running into the same issues. Like, why is my anxious attachment style being activated? I've learned all the self-coping things. I know how to communicate, but why am I still attracting people that are avoidant or non-committal? And then
I'm laughing because you know that we're going to go all into this later because same.
Exactly. And a lot of people can relate to this. So if you're listening to this, know that you're not alone. There's nothing wrong with you. I spent like decades dating this way. And so after a short but intense relationship, I swear, I thought he was the one. He was all in to what I thought was all in at the time. Told me that he never felt this way, was really communicative, like planned dates in advance. Like, oh my gosh, he's so available. We even planned to go to a wedding together. And there was this one night where I felt like he was actually opening up. And then he was like, I've never felt this way before. 24 hours later, he dumped me. And he pretended to other people that we like never dated. So that was like the ultimate, like, oh, my heart is crushed. This is devastating. Like, how can you pretend that we never dated or we were never a thing? So from there, I realized something has got to change. I'm taking responsibility for the things that I can control. I obviously can't convince him to stay with me. And that was actually something that I was really proud of, because in past relationships, I was like, please stay with me, I'll change. And so I know I respected his decision and then let him go. Of course, the wounding was still there. Like, there's a lot of devastation, like, oh, I don't feel worthy of love. Why did he change his mind about me suddenly? And then I started to realize, okay, well, what are the things that I can get curious about? And it was like, well, who am I attracted to? Why am I attracted to this person? In some ways, why are they familiar? But then also like familiar in a way that's like, ooh, I can't live without you. You're really sexy. The connection we have is so deep in terms of familiarity. But then also, why am I familiar with people that say that they're interested or even say that they're not interested, but then continue dating you or just completely end things? So that's when I started to notice that relationship pattern. And I realized it had a lot to do with like mindset of like, oh, I need to also believe that I'm worthy of love, which is also really challenging, because if I've had experiences that validate that I'm not worthy of love, where the heck do I even begin? So from there, I, applied what I learned with life coaching. I also got training and intimacy from my dating coach and psychotherapist, Ken Page. And that was just completely life-changing, like changed my whole perspective on love, redefine my definition of love, which is really helpful because oftentimes singles have a skewed, and we'll get into this, a skewed definition of what love is based on childhood. And so we aim, like when we have one definition of love, and if we haven't had examples of healthy love growing up, either intentionally or unintentionally, we tend to aim for that because like that's the only thing that we know. So redefined what love meant to me, started also practicing skills around like receiving reciprocal love instead of deflecting and, thinking that it was weak to like want someone to help me or do things for me, or like I didn't want handouts. So like really shifting that mindset of like, oh, I am worthy of someone like driving to come see me. So long story short, my passion became something very personal that I went through. And then I realized this is something that I want to focus on, learn these skills. Within 6 months, found the love of my life. And I was like, holy cow, this is life-changing. I spent decades chasing after people that were not good for me. And so spend most of my days helping people realize how amazing they are, how freeing it is to actually be yourself and to not change who you are, and then find a partner from that place. So a place of worthiness, so that they can set boundaries, they can say no, they can be discerning, and they can actually trust their gut. So that's how I got here.
I love that. And it's such a theme in like the last few episodes and in almost every episode I've ever recorded so far. And like why I started my podcast is that, yes, you train for this, or like people train for things, but like a lot of 9 times out of 10, your career isn't something you train for. It's because you're passionate about it. And when you're passionate about it and you really love it, you're willing to put in the work, which is why they say, like, if you love what you do, you won't work a day in your life. Like, I disagree. You're going to work 10 times harder, but you're willing to do that work because you love it. And like, it's a perfect example for you. Like, it became personal, and that's why you were so passionate about it. And like, it's paid off for you in the long run in your personal life, but also in your career. Like, now you get to help people do this. So you said a little bit about childhood and like your mindset and like limiting beliefs and that kind of thing. So, why is our childhood have such a big impact on us and like our relationship with our families and our parents? And how does that, like those experiences, shape us as, young adults and adults in our relationships with friends, with romantic partners, as in life, just in general? Like, how does our family impact us really?
Yeah, such a good question. So I also want to say that every single one of us has childhood wounds. And that could either be something that our parents intentionally did or unintentionally did. So this is not all blaming our family. It's more of like, oh, there are certain ways of thinking and believing or doing that gets passed on from generation to generation. Also, every generation does get better because everyone is doing the best that they can with the tools that they have. That also doesn't mean that things being done to you aren't hurtful. So like there's a difference between blaming and then acknowledging and not condoning certain behaviors. So I just want to say that, because if someone's like, oh, like it comes so easily for other people to be in a relationship, or like, healthy love is just something that's not for me, just know that a lot of people have their own flavor of like childhood trauma. And the most important thing is like getting clear on what your dynamic is. So that's the most important thing. Instead of maybe looking outward and being like, oh, everyone else has it easier, it's really a vulnerable thing to be like, well, what are my family dynamics? How can, like, because that's when the work starts. So this is such a great question, because I actually just came from a family wedding last week, and I hadn't seen or haven't been with my family since like, the beginning of the pandemic. So it's been like 2 years. I also want to preface this by saying I love my family. They're amazing. And then also there are certain dynamics at play that sometimes people aren't aware of. Like because I've been doing this work, I've been really aware of certain dynamics, and I'll get into some examples of that. But like being in the family, if I did not have this self-awareness, I would have made it my fault, or it's all about, it's my fault. I shouldn't be feeling this way. I'm too sensitive. Like everyone else around me is like making this seem like no big deal. So the question that I have to the audience is, what are your family dynamics? Do you try to be perfect and avoid being reprimanded by siblings or parents? Do you take care of others and anticipate everyone else's needs in front of your own? Do you make yourself smaller because maybe your parent or your siblings take up a lot of space? So maybe it's like taking up space in the conversation or space in the relationship, or it's all about me. You need to be on my schedule. I'm feeling a certain way, like you're holding a lot of space for that parent or a sibling. Do you maybe even spiral out of control because you overthink things to the point where you're overanalyzing because You're trying to protect yourself because if you did something wrong, you would get in trouble, right? So it's like, I'm trying to figure out all the right things to say, right? All the right things to do. And the last two is you hide your emotions because your family thinks that you take things personally. That actually happened to me. That's why I wrote this down. I was like, I have to write this down because I was processing things with my partner, my fiance, and also my brother. And my brother is such a different dynamic. My fiance is like, oh, I understand why you feel that way. It makes sense. Like completely listening ear, no judgment. And I'm again not at all blaming my brother. He's operating from a certain, from his own beliefs too. So I empathize with him. But he was very much like, you take things so personally. Like, why is that a big deal? If I didn't have that awareness, I would have internalized that as like, oh my God, this is my fault. Like, I do take things personally. I need to like hide my emotions. And the last part, which is what I was speaking about earlier, is like that self-doubt. Like, do you doubt yourself because your family thinks that you're too sensitive or you think about things so deeply? So that's just kind of like, you don't know the water that you're swimming in until you like jump out of the water because we're so immersed in it. Like, I would have not realized that these conversations and these dynamics were hurtful had I not experienced something else. And that's really challenging because I know a lot of singles, they're like, it's impossible to find healthy friendships, or it's impossible to find a deep and meaningful friendship. Everyone just wants to have small talk. I really want to talk about things deeply, or it's impossible to find a love of my life. And I just want to say that I hear you, because if you're immersed in these dynamics on a daily basis, it feels impossible to find anything different.
Yeah. Like there's so many good things. Like I can go so many different directions, but it's just, I've had to do a lot of, I've been doing a lot of this work myself in the last few months, the last year and a half, really. And, it's so true because I am a very sensitive and emotional person, and the people in my family are not. Not that they aren't sensitive, they just don't show it the same way that I do. And I'm, unafraid to be open about my sensitivity, and they're not. So it's like sometimes it's like too much for them to handle. And like, you get told that you're too much, you're too sensitive, you're too passionate, you're too this. And I've really had to like dig deep and look inward and be like, no, like I am all those things, but that's not a bad thing. And I'm okay. And I'm proud of that. And it took a very long time. And it still takes it's hard for me. It's really, really hard for me because my relationships, not just romantic, but friendships, I've always struggled with making friends. And I have more friends now through social media than I ever have had like physical in-person friendships. And I mean, a lot of that is COVID, and a lot of that is also being at school 3 states away from my house, my parents' house where I grew up, and wanting to return there, and I'm making friends there. So when I return, I have like friends. But it's really just because social media has allowed me to connect with people who have the same interests as me, whereas not necessarily being in school, I'm surrounded by the people that, have the same interests as me, even though we're studying the same things. We all come from different walks of life and different experiences. So I think it's so important that you say that, to like really for people to dig deep into themselves and like evaluate like their beliefs about their family and their experiences growing up, and like why they feel the way that they feel, and that it's okay to feel those things. So I love that. And it's so funny because my brother would never say like, why do you take things so personally? At least I don't think he would, but he's younger and he just has his own experiences. And like, I empathize with him because he has had his own experiences, growing up, but he just doesn't get it. And like, that's okay. I wouldn't wish a lot of my experiences on a lot of people in my life. And, so I'm glad he's never experienced it, but it's also hard when they don't get it. And that's a lot of times my struggle with people, is that like, I can't make someone understand something if they don't have their own experiences to understand it, or even if they don't have the experiences to the willingness to listen and learn. And a lot of people don't, just because they can't empathize. So I'm glad you brought that up too, because that's important. And just like, even though like you're both born to the same set of parents, like, and grew up in the same house, you could have completely different experiences. And that could affect a lot of times why your relationship growing up or and afterwards, and once you start building your own lives separate from each other and your own families, like why those dynamics are so different. So I'm glad you brought that up. But
can I say a couple things about that? Because that was so good, Kayla. Yeah, it really, even though we are in the same family, we operate from different beliefs and conditioning. Like, and I also will say, like, my brother, my sibling, is like a product of his environment and his like generation. Like, he very much has the belief around, like, you know, men need to not have emotions, or emotions are weak. And I also have internalized that as well. And of course, it's different because I am a woman, I identify as a woman. And so it's very much like, okay, men can't feel their feelings, and that's normalized. And then also, I should not be able to feel my feelings, but also there's slight permission, because in our society, women are also given permission to vent to other women. So it's just like these interesting dynamics of like how we grew up believing certain things and how they all still show up in our relationships. And it's really important too to the point that you said of like connecting with people that do get it, because even though in my family I may not be fully seen, and that's okay, it hurts, but also I'm like empathizing, we have different views on the world, that still does not hold me back from going after the type of relationships that I do want. So even then, hearing that from my brother, you're being too sensitive, I'm like, I'm at a point in my healing and personal development journey where I don't take that personal. I'm just like, okay, that's your own beliefs. I understand where you're coming from. And also I'm operating from a completely different mindset, because I also have people in my life that really love my sensitivity. And I think that's also why I do the work that I do. I could not be talking about relationships and childhood wounds and traumas without being sensitive, without being empathetic to a lot of what other singles looking for love or my clients are going through. If I didn't have that sensitivity, I feel like the coaching would just not be transformative at all. So I love what you said about being proud of these qualities, and also knowing that you're not going to be for everyone, and that is okay, because you don't want to shape shift yourself, which I did for years of like, I'm going to hide my sensitivity, or I need to get over my sensitivity in order to be in a relationship. And I love this with my clients, because like week one, they're like, oh my gosh, I did not realize that sensitivity was actually a good thing. I thought I had to fix that before I started dating. And so now they've realized like, oh, this is great. Sensitivity allows me to tap into other people's emotions. I can sense when things are not as they seem. I can kind of read through the lines or certain behaviors, and it allows them to like empathize with other people. Again, it's not making other people's abilities right or wrong. It's like, oh, okay, I have a certain set of skills and gifts, and that's okay. And I'm going to protect myself, create boundaries when I can. And then also create relationships, friendships, date people, relationships that they understand and they appreciate and they love my sensitivity.
Yeah, I was thinking like we grew up seeing like all those like cheesy quotes and like memes and stuff. Now it's like, I'm not everyone's cup of tea, or like I always used to say the one of like, I'm not everyone's cup of tea, but it's fine. I drink whiskey because I do. And I mean, I drink both, but I don't know, like stuff like that. Growing up, I would always like tell myself that. And like, it was my way of like rubbing like like putting a band-aid on the wounds. And like, I'm glad I did, because from a very young age, I knew that I was those things. And like, I was always proud of it, but I knew I had to hide it because other people didn't get it. And like, now I'm grateful that I've been able to see the true value of it. And I still jokingly say those things because, sometimes, I have to put the emotions away, and like, we have to, but I wouldn't be able to show up the way that I do on this podcast, online, even in my personal life, even in my academic life, if I wasn't truly aware of my sensitivity and my emotions, and I wasn't putting my energy into being 100% myself. So yeah, it takes a lot of work to get there, but I think it's, and it's still something I struggle with. Like, I'm proud of it, but it's still something I struggle with, on a regular basis. be fully proud of my emotions, but I've never shied away from them in the sense of like crying in public if I have to, like, because I have to. And it's a release. It feels good. And, it's hard. It's really hard to do, but yeah, I mean, so I don't know. I lost my train of thought, but, so yeah, once you are doing that self-awareness and work and you're putting out there the version of you that is, most aligned and self-actualized, and you're at the best place for yourself at that current point in time, like, how do you start now finding, where do you look for those friendships and relationships? How do you find those, start attracting that good energy, those people in your life, whether personal or, or romantic? Like, how do you start meeting the right people? You said like once you started doing the work and then really fast within 6 months, you met, your fiance now, like how does that happen? Where do we go from there? Like, you've done the work, you're actively doing this work, your clients are doing this work. Where do you tell them to do next?
Yeah, I love to demystify this process because we hear this a lot and I don't disagree with it. However, I like tangible examples. So when we hear like, oh, attract your ideal partner or manifest your ideal partner, I just want to know the how-tos. So like,
Same.
Great question. Well, it really does start with you. So like in the program that I run called Finally Found You, it's a 4-month program. The first month, we don't even date. We really focus on getting to know who you are. And this isn't like surface level. This isn't like, I like, doing certain hobbies, or like, I'm not going to date anyone who's like shorter than me. It's not like that. It's like, who are you? And like, what is important to you? Like, your sensitivity, is that something that you felt ashamed of? Why did you feel ashamed of it growing up? Where do you feel safe being sensitive? Is there anyone that, a friend or a family member or a coach or a mentor where you actually feel safe to like be vulnerable and sensitive? And if you don't, that's okay too. It's just something to notice. If it is, great, then you have that example of like, this is what it feels like in my body. This is how my mind feels when I'm with someone who actually understands me. So then from there, you're able to have a clear idea of what you're looking for. So it's a lot of like understanding who you are and asking the questions, like the hard questions of like, what do I feel ashamed of? Maybe you feel ashamed of wanting a committed relationship because maybe you have this belief that even though you want a committed relationship, showing interest in someone else will make you look weak. Or if you actually tell someone on the first date that you want a committed relationship, they might think you're desperate. So like, there are certain beliefs that we have that hold us back from finding love. And so that's why the first month or so is really getting clear on like, well, what mindsets are you operating from? Then introducing a new paradigm, because it's not like we're going to eliminate something and that's it. It's like, we need to, the behavioral therapist to me is like coming in, we need to replace it with a true and positive belief. It's not toxic positivity where it's just like, repeat this over and over until it feels true. It's like, where are you on your journey and what feels true to you? And then we can recalibrate, because we never want to gaslight ourselves to believing something that doesn't feel true. So when you understand who you are, then you can also understand what's important to you. Well, what do you feel uncomfortable with? Is it like, I don't feel comfortable having sex until I actually know the person, or I feel comfortable only going to dates out in restaurants instead of having them come back to my apartment or their apartment. It's like, once you know who you are, then you can also get really clear on what's important to you and what that actually looks like in terms of dating. Also in relationships, or friendships. So say it's really important to you that like honesty and upfront communication is really important to you. Maybe you had a past belief where being upfront meant you were bossy or rude or selfish. Rewiring and reframing that belief to, oh, it's actually kind to be upfront and honest. Then you go out into the world and you start practicing it, which is really scary, because if you're used to not expressing what you need or what you're comfortable with, then it's going to feel really scary to suddenly tell a friend like, hey, I actually can't go out tonight. I want to stay in. I'm feeling introverted. Because that can be really hard if you're used to saying yes all the time and your friends are like, yeah, you're the yes person. Let's go out and have fun. I need this. Then when you start saying no to them, you may or may not hit certain frictions. So part of knowing yourself, it gets a lot easier to express what you want and need, say no or say yes, because despite how the other person receives it or doesn't receive it, you'll be able to not necessarily internalize maybe their responses or reactions, because you know that you are being true to yourself. It doesn't mean that it's not going to hurt. Then also, this is more information for you to be discerning with who you surround yourself with, whether it's friends, family, or even a relationship. And going back to the example around conflict, like for me to be in conflict, because conflict is going to happen, the most important thing is the person that I'm in conflict with, whether it's a friend or, a partner, is this person committed to repairing the rupture or the conflict in the relationship? If they walk away, or if they don't communicate that they need some time alone, or if they see my need as an attack or criticize me, or they shut down and call me sensitive, then that's more information for me to realize I don't feel fully safe in this. I need to either leave, end this relationship, or express a boundary. So that's really the most helpful thing is, so I could introduce certain tactics around how do you know who's a good friend and list certain qualities. But I think the most important thing is knowing who you are, knowing what's important to you, and knowing what you need to feel safe. This also might be confused with, because I hear this a lot with dating, of I date someone who's the safe option. That's not that. I also have a freebie on my website, which I can share with you, Kayla, which actually shares certain questions around how to gauge whether or not you feel emotionally safe with someone. So I won't go fully into that, but you can check it out on the website.
I'll put it in the show notes for people.
Yeah, because there is a difference between I feel safe and I feel seen and understood, and I can tell someone that I'm ashamed of something, or I'm embarrassed, or I'm insecure, and they're going to receive it well. They're not going to take it as an attack. And then be able to adjust the relationship or friendship from there. So it really is about being aware, and then also being open-minded to trying certain things so that you can put yourself out there, because we will never know what we're capable of unless we put ourselves out there. It's going to feel really uncomfortable, but it's also a way for you to understand yourself. So I love the people in my audience because they don't see, or they date to find their person, but they also date to learn and grow. So they can actually treat relationships and dating as an experiment. If I say this, what happens? I'm curious about this. Let me try this. Oh, that didn't feel good. I got rejected, but what did I learn about myself? So it's a constantly evolving process. Doesn't mean that you're not going to be hurt along the way. However, there is that momentum of okay, I am worthy. I can do this. I'm learning new things about myself. This person's not the best fit for me. That's fine. Doesn't mean that I'm better than them, et cetera. It's really seeing things clearly because you know yourself really well.
Yeah, I love that. There's so many ways I can go with this because we could talk forever. But just one thing you said towards the beginning of that was it's you don't give them qualities, or you don't ask them what is your manifestation list, because we have them, and it's okay to have them because you want to get a clear picture of what you're looking for when you're out there actively meeting people. But it's so important to know who you are first and be willing to learn about yourself, because the beauty about dating a bunch of different people is you're not just learning what you do want, you're learning what you don't want, but you're also learning about yourself and you're growing. So I love that you brought that up at the end. But just it's important to not just ask what characteristics do you want, but that's the hard part about dating and dating apps. I'm on them, and I don't know if you were ever on them at all, but I'm sure
I was.
Okay. I don't know. Or I'm sure you see your clients on them, and it's really hard because it's only depending on the app, you only see small snippets of the other people, and it's not a full picture. And people put these fronts on and these games, and it's just don't play games. I want to very early on, if I feel that I can't get deep, I'm not a surface level person to begin with, but if I feel that I can't be deep with this person, and it doesn't have to be deepest, darkest childhood secrets, but just we can talk intellectually. Like I'm the type of person that like the most attractive thing to me is intellectual stimulation. Like obviously looks are important, but like I need to be emotionally stimulated. And so if I very early on don't see that happening, it's just like that's it. Like it's not going to happen. Or if like from not even liking you on a profile, but like if I can tell from your profile that you're just probably aren't going to be that person, or you're only looking for like a hookup or whatever, like I'm going to pass. So I like that you brought that up, like how important to know you and like who you are and what you want out of this experience, and be willing to do the work on yourself, because it makes the active dating process easier. Because it's not just like everyone says like you have to date a million different guys, like kiss a lot of frogs to find the right guy. And that's true, but it's also like you have to be learning each time you do it, not just going through the motions. And it's really hard and it's really exhausting to go through the motions of meeting a bunch of different people, but like, and growing from them. But that's the best way to do it.
I love what you're saying. And also I hear this a lot too, of like, you have to kiss you have to kiss a lot of frogs to find your prince. And I want to offer a different mindset around this, because there is a way to
I don't agree with that. I don't agree with that in the sense of like going through the motions of it, but like I agree with it, that sentiment, in the sense of like it's very rare nowadays your first boyfriend is the person you're going to marry. Like that's my parents' generation, you know, like maybe yours, like they've been together since they were 15 years old. Like that's really, really rare nowadays. And like you're going to have to date a lot of different people, and that's okay. That's more how I meant it, not just like going around like hookup culture and like kissing a bunch of different people.
No, I completely agree. And if hookup culture is your thing, there's no shame in that either. I definitely did that, and I tried it on, and it wasn't the right fit for me. Same. More power to you if you're able to do that.
I wish I could.
Yeah, I spent a lot of my time. We'll
get to that in a sec when we get to intimacy stuff. But yeah.
Yeah, I spent a lot of my time wishing that I could like compartmentalize my feelings in sex, but it like never worked, because then I also realized, oh, that's just not who I am. I can't separate the two. Like part of like my humanity is like, oh, I love it when I can be emotional and talk through things, and you know,
yeah,
that's what I need.
Yeah, me too.
And so I'm like trying to figure out how to say this.
Just say
it does sound kind of counterintuitive to like
just say it,
because we hear this a lot. I know my mind is like formulating. We hear this a lot of like, you need to cast a wide net and go on many dates in order to find your person. And I actually disagree, but I will say that I believe that for the longest time. But then after years of doing that, I was still dating the same people over and over again. So I put in the effort. I went on the dates. Yeah. And so to me, I'm like, why would I, and this is not literal at all, but like, why would I want to continue kissing frogs if I could just kiss the prince? Right. So like, what I mean by that is there's so many levels to this. Like my analytical brain is like, going crazy. So there is a certain way we date. I think if it's of the belief that we need to cast a wide net, see what comes up, there might be bycatch, or we might actually get the thing that we want. That is typically from the mindset of like, I need to front, I need to put on a performance, I need to play games. It's like the games of seduction. Let's see who can care less. Let's see who can be apathetic, but I'm also going to be really cool and mysterious. We might also have like a really great connection. You might really like me, but then also it feels really unfulfilling, or it ends in heartbreak and pain and devastation. So that's like one way to operate. And then also the other way to operate, which I was able to do with support from my coach and my community, and seeing dating and love and intimacy completely different, was when you don't play these games, you can actually be yourself. Being yourself is really scary. However, when you do that from the beginning, you're saving yourself years. You're saving yourself hours of having to like front and pretend who you are. Instead, you're actually being yourself, which makes dating a lot more exciting. Second part is actually getting really curious about who you're attracting, or who you are attracted to and why. Again, this is like the psychological thing, because had I not reflected on who my type was, I would have not been able to change that. And I promise you, I would have never noticed my fiance now on Hinge. I would have never swiped right. And so that's the thing where we're getting really clear on who we're attracted to and why. And I'll share a little bit about that in a second, because you will then start utilizing dating apps completely different. That's the thing. Because like right now you might be swiping.
I'm using them so different now because like I said, like the reason I don't agree, like I actually am more towards your mindset of it now. I just said it because it's something that we hear a lot, but I'm meeting a lot of people, and I say that in air quotes. Like I'm meeting a lot of people on dating apps, but very early on, I know, I know my type, not just physically, but like emotionally, like emotional capacity, emotional intelligence, that is attractive to me. And it's so important to know like what you're attracted to, like you're saying, like, and I can pick that up really early on, even on a dating app, because I'm coming from a place of like, I know, like, I'm not that I'm putting everything out there right away, but like I'm putting it out there to see who's receptive to that. And if you're not, bye. How, like, I want to get into like, the emotional, like not just emotional intelligence, but emotional, it goes to intimacy. And like, that is something that you and I have talked about, that we both struggled with. And, that's something that I really, really struggle with, which was the catalyst for me wanting to have you on and have these conversations. It's, if you've struggled with relationship trauma, or even for me, it stems from even childhood trauma, which we've all experienced, and so what do you like when people think intimacy is just sex and like physically like intercourse, but there's so much more to it. And to me, like it's more important to me to have an emotional like intelligence and like emotional capacity, and like that to me is intimacy, where I can truly be myself and share myself, and like I don't feel judged or ashamed or like scared to tell you. Like that to me is, I need that in order to physically be intimate with someone.
Yeah. So I will also say that everyone is afraid of intimacy. And I like how and everyone also has different levels to it. I like how you describe intimacy as something that's more than sexual, because intimacy is essentially getting close to another person. And that can be, of course, emotionally, physically, mentally, your soul, like, being close and being seen by them. It's beyond what happens in the bedroom. It is emotional as well. And so I just want to say, because I used to think like, oh my gosh, I have intimacy issues, something's wrong with me. But what I have learned is everyone is afraid of getting close to another person. Like, sure, maybe you've also worked through it and you have a different relationship to it, but you're not alone in being afraid of getting close to someone. So like some examples of that are like, intimacy challenges would even be like, do you deflect compliments, or do you deflect when someone does nice things for you? Or do you actually think that they're doing it out of obligation? Because there's certain beliefs around, if I accept help, then that's going to be a handout. It's like, so there are ways of where we deflect getting close to another person. Because if we say, actually receive someone's ability to do like a kind gesture, that will be so much for our nervous system to like even process that we might even flee. So like that's another reason why I also do the work that I do, is because once we identify healthy reciprocal love, your instant reaction is to run. I had to like talk through this with my coach because I wanted to run. I had like one foot out the door. I was like, I'm not attracted to him anymore. I don't want to do this, because it's such a new environment that you basically get scared off. And the other thing that I will say, because you said so many great things too, I kind of want to go back to identifying your type, and this is all connected, because I also did like the manifesting thing. I did this for years of like, I wrote everything I wanted in a partner down, from like looks, emotional abilities, interests, what they dressed like.
Wait, Oh, not to cut you off, but like that, it's so important. Like, cause I did the same thing. Like, I recently did my manifest list, but like people, when they do it, or like, like you write down like in your notebook as a kid, like what you want Prince Charming to be, you only do like the physical stuff. Like, I legit like did physical, career, family, like hobbies. Like, I went like full, like fledged out. Like, and it's so important that you, and like to do that. And it's funny that you did that too, because it's not just manifesting a physical person, it's like the whole person. Like, who are they? Like, literally, like not just family, like my family with them in the future, but like their family backgrounds, their values. Like, I put a whole values list, like to like what they, their view on the world. Like, I want to make sure that they're in alignment. They don't have to be the exact same, but like they have to, you have to be willing to build a life with this person, that they have to go together. So, not to like go too much into that, we can, but like that's a whole other episode. But just like, it's important for people to know, like, if you're going to write a manifest list, like, it's not just physical, it's not just like the superficial stuff, it's also like the really like actual important deep stuff
Yeah.
too.
So I did the same thing too. And it's like, this is going to be like a yes and. So like for the first years that I was doing this, I was imagining like my partner, I wanted him to be like put together. I was like, oh, I like that clean look. I like, stubble, but mostly like a clean face. I want him to be entrepreneurial. I want him to be ambitious. So here's the thing about this is like, even though, and I'm not saying that this is wrong. Even though I did this, again, I was so crystal clear on what I was looking for, what my type was, down to like job, what their values were. And then I still was dating people, even though they had that sheepskin, I was still like, they looked good on paper. It was still lacking a lot of like that emotional depth. So even in the last relationship that I had, everything like to a T felt, I was like, at that point, I was like, I manifested him. He's an entrepreneur. He's really into kindness and like all these things. But then like when it came to like actual intimacy, like completely cut off contact. And I was like, what just happened? So let me talk a little bit about like the psychology around this, because it really is helpful to get clear on what you're looking for, but then also like, why are you attracted to that? So Harville Hendricks is a relationship expert and also a couples therapist. And he talks about how we're consciously drawn to the positive qualities of our new love. And also unconsciously, we're attracted to the same qualities that hurt us in the first place. So in ways that are familiar. So I'm like, how do I even describe this? Like a good example of this is like, your type might be really charismatic and fun, but also sometimes are really cold and distant, or they show a lovable social side to the public, but when you're at home, they're like really just completely like off emotionally. Like they're so different when you're with them at home. Or maybe they treat you like a trophy, like as someone to show off, or maybe they're affectionate a lot of the time, but then there's like mean streaks and they'll blow up on you. The last one, which is so relatable, is like they prioritize work over you. So they also prioritize maybe work or their friends or their family over you. So the reason why I bring this up is like, there are certain qualities that I found sexy. I was like, I really want someone who is entrepreneurial. Then I'm also realizing I'm attracted to that because also my family put work first. That's also something that hurt me in the past. So it's like this really alluring, oh, they're so sexy, they're so ambitious, but then it's also really familiar of like, they're not going to make time for me. So it's like getting really clear on why we're attracted, because there are good things. So I'm not saying like, this is also like kind of like the mind shift, is because like when I talk to people before they work with me, they're like, we had a great connection. I thought that they were the one. And I think that's also because they created this, they were so clear. And I think that's great. You're so clear on what you're looking for. And then now like that next step is like, well, how and why are you attracted to them? Because we're going after what's familiar, again, what we've learned in childhood. And then this is actually happening consciously or unconsciously within us, is we want to go back to the scene of the crime and rewrite our history. So we think it's a noble pursuit because if they can actually finally prioritize us instead of work, if they can actually be consistently kind and have an even temper, or if they can like apologize, then we will feel worthy of love. So that was kind of like my mind was blown when I first read that, of like, oh, that's it. Like, I am attracted to people that are both like really ambitious, but then don't prioritize relationships. So it's getting really clear on that. And then also like, how are these attractions familiar in terms of childhood? And then asking yourself, is that really a noble pursuit? And I forget where I read this, probably from like Kenny Casey or someone on Instagram, maybe the guy with the balloons, I'm forgetting his handle, about you.
Case Kenny.
That was Case Kenny. And I know that he does writings in Chicago. And then there's also another.
I love him.
Then there's another account where it's a guy and he writes like inspirational things with like balloons or like other mediums. I forget his handle. One of the two. They talk about how you can't heal in the same place that hurts you. So I used to think it was really noble to like go and chase after people that would also trigger the heck out of me, and then think life or relationships and life is hard. If I can get over this challenge, if I can get them to change, if I can caretake them and they finally come around, that's when I'll find love. And so realizing that I can't actually heal my triggers in those environments, and realize, oh, I'm feeling anxious for a reason. I actually know that this person's not a good fit for me because they're not calling, they're not reciprocating, plans. I'm always going to their apartment. They're never coming to mine. They never want to meet my friends, like all these different things. It's like, oh, okay. What can I do to change my definition of love and feel worthy of the thing that I actually am going for? Because if not, I'm going to keep dating the same people with the same emotional challenges over and over again.
Yeah. And you said something there, like, like everyone thinks relationships are supposed to be hard. And now there's like this whole, like, are they supposed to be hard or are they supposed to be easy? What does that really mean? And I think I want to get back to the intimacy part, but I think it goes to, attachment styles, and like, why sometimes relationships are so hard or so easy is because attachment styles, the two people in the relationship, how they communicate and how they interact with each other, and like their needs and wants and how they're met plays a big role into it. So do you think that relationships are supposed to be hard, or are they supposed to be easy? And why do we have those perceptions? And then what are the attachment styles? Like, how does that all fit in?
Great question. Well, I think we first learn how to love in childhood. And if our relationship dynamics with our family is hard, we're going to think love is hard. It's also been taught in media. It's also been taught in, like every Disney movie, of like, if you just wait patiently, they will change, they will come around, they will see how great you are. And just a lot of television and movies. I something that I love to do is like,
society propagates that like you can change them. Newsflash, you can't.
Yeah, I like, part of like what a fun weekend plans for me and my fiance is like, we like to watch like early 2000s or like 2010 movies, or like rom-coms, and it's just, and even now to this day, we're definitely changing our perception of love, but just like the messaging is like,
oh, I was watching one of those the other night and I had to turn it off because I was just trying to watch like mindless TV, and I was like, what is this? This is awful advice.
Yeah, of like, you just play the game, like women need to not be desperate. Don't tell them that you're interested. I'm just like, or like, what is Something Borrowed? I think I watched that one.
That's the one it was The Sweetest Thing is the one I was watching, but Something Borrowed was like one of the options too. But yeah,
it's entertaining and there's no judgment. Like I definitely
they're great movies.
In my old thinking, I definitely have been like, so in Something Borrowed, the premise is like the best friend. I'm like, I'm totally gonna butcher this, but essentially like the woman, the main protagonist, she could not tell one of her best friends from like law school that she liked him. And so they basically had like a lot of like tension for like years. And then when he was finally going to ask her out, she didn't feel good enough for love. She thought that he was interested in her friend, and then him and her friend end up getting together because he thinks that she's his actual friend is not interested in her. So he ends up going after her best friend. And then the whole movie is like really messy because eventually the guy and the best friend get married. And so the protagonist is like, I have feelings for you. And like, anyways, it's just, and this is really, I know a lot of people can probably relate to this. And also the message at the end of the movie is you can basically sabotage your life and like wait for this man and he will eventually come around.
And it'll happen.
And I'm like,
yeah,
oh no, that really breaks my heart because I'm like getting teary. I'm like, no, like that's just like it's not the best message because like you said, like you want to date people that are like already on the same page as you. They want the same things as you, as opposed to like leaping through hoops, proving yourself, hitting certain challenges. So yeah, actually, I remember the question that you asked is like, is love hard? And we like are introduced from this message or to this message by media, family, etc., culture, past generations. And so I will say that, and it's such a complex thing, so I'm going to like try to like succinctly describe this. So I will say that love is not hard. I will say that there are certain challenges. That said, in my relationship now, like our challenge is like, let's, figure out budgeting, or like how are you feeling about starting a new job, or like how are you feeling about family, like processing things that are like really challenging, and also knowing that our commitment to each other isn't wavering. And I think in relationships that are actually hard, it's like you're trying to figure out if you are going to stick around, if you're going to wait, or like, why is this person triggering me? I thought I learned my lesson. It's really draining. It feels very much like a roller coaster. It feels really like hot and cold. I feel like we tend to think that that's the challenges that we need to overcome, when actually the challenges is like, if you're on the same team, life is going to happen and you're going to be partners and work through those challenges and overcome them, versus I'm fighting with you because I don't feel understood, or you did this and it hurt me and I'm triggered and you're not trying to acknowledge my feelings, or you don't want to commit to me. It's like it's a different set of challenges. And I think people often think, oh well, no relationship is perfect, relationships are hard. And to that, I'm like, that also was taught from like family. Like that was definitely taught of like, relationships are hard work. Like if you're not struggling, then it's not a real relationship. But I think it's like you realizing that you can grow.
What is hard? Like you have to think of like what, it's like pick your battles. Like what is hard? Like, I agree. I think it's going to be hard because life gets hard, but like it shouldn't be hard to communicate and like to live with that person and like to build a life with them and like be in a relationship with them, which is where attachment styles come in. And I think a lot of times the reason people say like relationships are supposed to be hard is because they're dating the wrong type of person for them, not just like in like, values and like goals and like ambitions and like personality, but just like in attachment styles and the way that these people put out love and their feelings and their emotions. So what are these attachment styles? And like, I don't know. I think I'm anxious attachment, but I'm actively trying to be more secure attachment. And I think I'm getting better, but I'm still definitely more in the anxious, but a lot better than I was last year. But what are they? And, what's the spectrum, and how do you get to secure attachment, which is the one that everyone should strive to be at?
Yeah, I will say that this also ties into you can't heal in the same place that hurts you. So I was anxiously attached, and I always found myself in the anxious avoidant trap. So like anxiously attached is like, I can't live without this person. I have a lot of anxiety around love and relationships. I can't focus. I overthink things. I don't know my worth. I am constantly waiting for the other shoe to drop. I'm waiting for them to leave. Avoidant is, I don't need anyone to take care of me. I am great on my own. I'm going to focus on my work. It would be nice to have someone, or maybe it's not nice to have someone, or I'm just going to be like hyper independent and single. And then secure is like that interdependence, which is like, I know who I am. I can rely on myself, but I also see the value and understand that I'm a human. I need other people, and that's okay. So it's like having the generosity, of course, with limits of like knowing yourself to be able to like say yes or no when that feels true to you. I also, before getting into that, want to say that there is, and I can relate to this, right, of like feeling a lot of shame for being anxiously attached. However, know that there is a reason why, and it's not because there's something wrong with you. Think about being anxiously attached as a kid. You probably really loved someone to the point where like you just had this undeniable, like it could be to a parent, it could have been to a family member or sibling, or someone that you really admired growing up, where you really loved them, and then they disappointed you, or they, again, unintentional or intentional, or maybe they left, or maybe they passed away, right? So you had so much love for that person. The way that you coped with that is like, I need to be anxious and figure out how I can manage like my reality, or like I need to be able to control things in order to gain a sense of security. So like, see this as like, this is a way that you protected yourself. You love someone so much that you didn't want to lose anyone, that you were trying to basically be bend over backwards, be the perfect person in order to avoid that rejection. Same with avoidance. It's like you love someone growing up so much, but maybe you weren't getting your needs met to the point where you were like, I'm going to preserve myself by creating distance between other people so that no one can hurt me. And then secure is, and again, people can like come in and out of these, and I'm not going to like glorify secure, which I've also done in the past before. Like, you had a perfect childhood. It's just like, oh, maybe they likely had examples in their life where those certain skills were practiced. They were able to rely on their family. Then also they were able to have that autonomy to be themselves. So just know that like wherever you fall on the spectrum, like that is okay. There's no shame in that. And so to answer your question, because I would always go after avoidance, I'd always think that I need to fix avoidance, or like be their therapist or their caregiver, or like give them space, let them do their own thing. Like they need to work through stuff. So like, I'm going to distance myself from them so that they can finally figure stuff out. I think part of the reason was, it's like the same thing with like the prince and the frog. It's like, why am I going to continue to put in emotional and energetic labor to making someone change when I can actually just go and kiss someone who's like secure, or like a frog? And also it's easier said than done, right? Because like part of our identity might also be like, I need to caretake. I need to have a role or a purpose in a certain relationship. So again, it all comes back to the beliefs. If we believe that part of a healthy and fulfilling relationship is, I can rely on my partner, it is okay to need other people, we actually then change who we're attracted to. Like you're going to slowly over time lose your taste for people that are avoidant, because you're just like, that's not good for me. Then you're also going to make yourself available to people that are like, oh, I like planning dates, or like, I'm enthusiastic about you, let's go get coffee. Like that's really
literally where I'm currently at. It's so funny, because it's funny. I was definitely anxious attachment with some avoidant attachment tendencies, and I was highly attracted to avoidant attachment because I'm a very maternal person. And so everything you were just saying, I was like, yep, that's me. Like, I don't know if you saw me nodding my head. I was like, yep, that's me. But yeah, now I'm heading more towards secure attachment and being interdependent. And so I want to talk about inter versus independent, because they're two different things, and you need a little bit of both, but it's better to be interdependent. But it's so funny that you say that, because it's, yeah, like I would date avoidant attachment, and I wanted so badly to not change them. I never tried to change anyone, but it was just like, it made me feel like, I've never been the type of person to know that I would feel like my purpose in a relationship. That was never the type of person I was. But like, I like to help people. I don't like to fix people. I never try to fix anyone or change anyone, but I like to help people. So it was just like, I felt I got a lot of like weird satisfaction from like that. And it's a really unhealthy thing to do. So because you lose yourself in the process.
Yeah.
So I'm glad you brought that up.
I can relate. And it's like asking, who are you outside of that role, which is what I love doing with clients, because it's like, if you take away the helper role, the caregiving role, the therapist role, it's like, well, who are you actually underneath that? And it's like spend time with that part of you, so then you can recalibrate and then actually create a relationship that's more in line with that, as opposed to the role or like the shoulds or the persona.
Yeah. So really back to, so interdependence is when you are okay with being independent, but you also are not afraid to ask people for help. And like, and it's like, so it's codependent, independent, and interdependent. So I just want to touch on that really fast. And independence is like, I don't need anyone. Like, so just for people to like briefly touch on that. And codependence is when you like rely on someone, so to almost to your detriment, like it could be really, really harmful. So I would say I'm definitely trying to be a lot more secure and interdependent now, and I think I'm doing a pretty good job of it. But where I become not codependent but more like anxious, I revert back to my anxious tendencies because in my intimate relationship. So I want to touch on intimate relationships and how can someone who is afraid of physically being intimate, how can, like, is there any actionable tips you have for people who are dating or someone who's in a relationship where, you know, how do you make space for being emotionally intimate where you can now be physically intimate? And it's something that you and I talked about before is, you know, there's a lot in my past I don't need to tell them, but in order for me to feel comfortable going there physically, sometimes I don't know if I should, and if I do tell them, when, you know, trauma, and like, you know, do I tell them after? And like, I don't know, like, do I tell them after, but like risk not enjoying it, or do I tell them before and risk not even getting to that point, but then like them thinking I'm weird or whatever? Or do I not tell them at all and then risk like a freak out in the middle and it just being even worse later? So how to navigate being afraid of physical intimacy when you're newly dating someone and you've been dating for a while now, you're talking to them and it's kind of like that's the next step, like discovering whether you're compatible in that way.
Yeah, this is all going to tie in really nicely. So like you mentioned, there's a spectrum of like independent, and then on the other side it's codependent, and in the middle it's interdependent. So that's on a spectrum. And then also a common mistake that many people make is like, I am the one that's in charge of whether I'm independent, codependent, or interdependent. I will say it's actually yes, and it's like, as humans, we need co-regulation and self-regulation in order to survive, which means I need to be able to have the awareness around what my environment is. And then also I need to rely on other people like to help me also co-regulate or navigate my relationships. So the reason why I emphasize that so much is because if you find yourself in a situation where you're starting to question, is this too early to bring up? Can I say this right now? That's actually something to evaluate the environment you're in. What is the connection or attraction that you're in with this person that is either enabling codependent tendencies in terms of like, I'm questioning what I'm capable of. I'm questioning what I actually need. So that's something to really notice too, because in certain environments, you might feel safer to even just say, hey, I'm not comfortable with this. In situations where maybe you're not feeling, 100% safe because maybe maybe you don't know them that well, or maybe you're afraid that they're going to not accept a certain part of yourself, or maybe you're afraid that they're going to leave if you say no. So it's like, okay, that might actually be something about the environment that you're in, and it may be something to get curious about. And then also either shift or have a conversation beforehand. Because if you end up, let's say, I don't even want to say scaring them off. If they decide to like not be interested in you, then again, you can be like, okay, that probably wasn't the environment for me. Because ideally in a relationship, like you can even treat this as like an interview or like an audition of like, you want to be able to bring up your needs when they come up to you. Because if you're focused on the right time, the right way to say it, you can act like, imagine a year from now, like maybe you got laid off from a job, or like maybe work is really hard, or like you're having a fight with your family member. Those same tendencies are going to be there. When can I bring this up to my partner? Oh no, like they're struggling with work. I'm going to have to wait for them to like, work to not be overwhelming for me to bring up my stuff. So it's like, treat that as a sign, as likely this might not be the best relationship or connection for you, because you need that co-regulation in order to feel safe for you to even bring stuff up. So some signs might be like, this person's like really open-minded, or like they can assure you, they can actually verbally assure you that like, oh, I can relate to your struggles, or like, oh, I understand why you feel that way. Let's talk about it. Or you're not ready to have sex. Okay, fine. I'm not going to pressure you. Right. So it's like evaluating ourselves, but then also evaluating the environment that we're in. And I feel like many people feel like it's their fault that they're in these situations. They don't even get curious about the environment that they're in to be able to start asking themselves these questions, because they think it's like, oh, it's my fault that I don't want to have sex. I'm not comfortable. I should just say yes.
Yeah. No, I think that's such a good like thing to think about. We talked about so many great things, and I want to have you come on another time and do like either do like a Q&A or do like more like dating stuff. But for someone who is actively dating or wants to, what is your best piece of advice? Like, what is your number one dating tip for someone, guy or girl or non-binary, who's dating and, they know what they want. They're in their best mindset that they have at the moment that they've ever had, and they're actively working on themselves, and they just, they're open to meeting the right person and doing the work and having these hard conversations and being able to truly explore whether this is the right person for them. What advice do you have for someone?
So my advice is, you don't need more confidence. You actually need the courage to start. Whether that's like courageously asking for what you need, or saying no in the bedroom, or picking the restaurant, or actually downloading the app, putting yourself out there. Because if you wait to be perfect, or you wait to be confident, you're going to be waiting forever. Confidence comes from putting yourself out there and being brave. I remember also when I first started my coaching business, it took me 3 years, because I had, in my mind, I was like, I have to be perfect. I have to be, confident in order to try. Same with dating. It's like, oh, I don't have any experience of dating. I need to like read all about dating before I put myself out there. So if you wait for all of the lights to turn green, you will never leave the driveway. I forget whose quote that is, but I use it all the time because it's so true. Yeah. So I would encourage you to take that first step, and it doesn't have to be a huge step. It could just be a small step where you're like, okay, I did this because I am brave and I want to keep doing more of these things. So whether that's just download the app. You don't have to swipe. You don't have to create a profile. Just download the app. That is a win. Or, tell people that you are interested in dating now. Like, be able to take those small steps, because the more that you do those brave things, the easier we'll get to do some of the harder things, So don't wait for all the lights to turn green before you start.
I love that. And courage has always been a word that people say to just use to describe me. So I love, and it's something that I'm very passionate about, is just being courageous and going for it. And like I said a little while ago, like ripping off the Band-Aid, like not being afraid to jump in and like just run with it and see where it goes, because you never know where it can lead. So I really love that quote. You don't need the confidence to start. You just need the courage to start. So I really love that. This has been incredible. We need to do more because we can talk forever. But for anyone who wants to learn more about you, either have you be their coach or see the amazing resources that you provide, where can everyone find you?
Yeah, I have a bunch of like free resources on my website at gabriellevaldez.com. Check out my blog. I have a bunch of also like freebies. So like checklists to make sure that you're dating the best fit for you, or like how to assess whether or not this person is good for you or bad for you. So go ahead and check it out there. And I also do hang out on Instagram and have like interviews and really in-depth posts. So feel free to check out my Instagram and my website. Oh, also the last thing is I do more tangible how-tos in my newsletter too. So I have a weekly newsletter where I share something for you to like implement immediately, or something that will like have or inspire you to have that aha moment so that you can use your time while you're dating more effectively and so you can be yourself. So yeah, I have those 3 ways to get in contact with me. Thank you so much for having me, Kayla.
I will put everything in the show notes. Thank you so much. This was so great.
Wasn't she just amazing? I hope you love this episode just as much as I did. I cannot wait to have her on for part 2. So don't forget to leave a rating and review, screenshot and tag us if you like this episode. It's the best way to grow the show. Please subscribe and follow on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. Don't forget to give her a follow as well, and shoot us a DM and let us know your favorite part of the episode and leave us any questions, so when we do a part 2 in the future, we can answer any questions that you guys have. And definitely check out the show notes below for all of her info and any resources that we talked about in the episode. I want to do a 2021 recap podcast episode soon before the year is over, so also leave me some questions in a question box in my stories, or just DM me or shoot me an email or in the comments of my latest episodes or podcast posts, however you want to chat with me, so I can do a recap and answer any questions you guys have. And just I want to chat with you guys. This platform, I say it a lot, but has been the best, most fulfilling thing I have done this year. It's only been like 3 months. I think this week is exactly 3 months, and it's just been the best experience ever. So I'm so grateful for this platform, and we have reached over 1,000 downloads, and that was one of my main goals for the podcast for 2022, quarter 1. So the fact that we're hitting it in quarter 4 of 2021 is just incredible, and I'm over the moon, through the roof excited. I feel so happy, and just really this is something I'm meant to be doing. So thank you so much for listening to this week's episode and to all of our episodes. Episode 14, I can't believe that we've been doing this for 3 months now, and you guys are really loving it, and I just definitely let me know who you want me to have on in 2022 as well, and I look forward to chatting with you guys next week, even though it's Christmas almost. I think there will be an episode, probably short and sweet, probably another Q&A solo episode, but I really wanted to get this episode up for you guys because it has a lot to do with family and relationships, and it's the holiday season, and it's a really fitting episode as we go into spending time with our families for the next few weeks. But yeah, thank you guys so much for listening, and I'll talk to you guys next week.